The holiday season is here, and more families than ever will be going through their first holiday without their loved one. Learning how to cope without your loved one is not easy. Grief is a journey, whether the loss is expected or sudden, and one that requires grieving and mourning. Thanks for joining us for this week's Health News You Can Use. I'm Lindsay Stish. This week we're talking about grief during this holiday season, how you can bring hope to your holiday if you have lost a loved one, and the support St. Luke's offers to those who are grieving. With me today is Brian Pendleton, bereavement coordinator and chaplain at St. Luke's Home Care and Hospice. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brian, first, how can the first year be the hardest for people who have lost a loved one?
I think it's important to say at the outset that if you've lost a loved one in the last several months, if this is the first holiday season that you're experiencing after that loss, everything is different. And this year will be different. And the firsts that we often talk about in grief support are those birthdays, anniversaries, special events, and certainly the holiday season that we're in right now is one of those. Just recognizing the intensity of the grief that someone may feel, that things are different. If you've lost a spouse, if you've lost a parent, or another family member, close loved one, things are different. Life has fundamentally changed, and especially in that first year, the waves of grief can ebb and flow. The intensity of it can be very difficult and very painful to experience.
So what can people's grief journey look like?
People who are grieving oftentimes have physical, emotional, and spiritual symptoms. And everyone's grief is unique, but these seem to be common across the board for many people. Physically, your appetite can be impacted, your sleep patterns can be off. Some who are grieving will talk about feeling a kind of brain fog, what we call grief brain in grief support work. That's a very common experience. Emotionally, some of those feelings can be deep sadness, isolation, anger, fear, regret. Those are all very common things to feel. And spiritually, sometimes the loss of someone very close to us can cause us to doubt our place in the world, to doubt what we thought we knew about the world around us, and even our conceptions of God or our higher power can be altered or changed or challenged by grief.
So many different ways, different for each person.
Absolutely.
What are some things that people can do to bring hope, comfort, and joy to their holiday?
I think one of the most important things to say about that is simply to lean into what you're feeling this season. If you are grieving the death of a loved one, to find ways to be open and honest about where you are. Rituals are key, and they're very important. For some people that I work with in grief support, continuing those long-standing traditions that families have had is a very important part of that process, and very key and very meaningful. For others, it's the exact opposite. That's the last thing they feel like doing, is celebrating, having the normal gatherings, the normal trappings of the season. That's not something that many people feel up to. And wherever you fall on that spectrum, it's okay. You get a pass. If this is the first year since you've lost your loved one, do what feels right to you. Be flexible, be kind to yourself, and understand that this year is different. And it should be, if you've lost someone that you love.
Absolutely. So is it okay for people to take some time away from their family members over the holiday if needed?
Absolutely, yes. Certainly with the coronavirus pandemic, the time that we do spend with our loved ones may even this year still look very different than before. It's not good to be totally isolated from people. It's important that we are connected to those we love in some form or fashion, but to be the last one to the gathering or to be the first one to leave is okay. I think it's key to lower our expectations. I think oftentimes in the holiday season there are expectations that we have internally as well as externally. Our own expectations, gifts to buy and exchange, gatherings to attend, certain things that we've always done. And then there are others' expectations too that can weigh heavy on us, to let go of those if this is the first year without your loved one, and simply allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and to do what you feel like you can.
Mm-hmm. Great. So what advice would you give to family members who are going through that grief together?
Much the same as I've mentioned already, that each person's grief journey is unique. Mm-hmm. Your grief journey is not going to be like that of your loved one. So be flexible, be kind to yourself and others. Certainly be present with one another. Find ways to give space to the reality of the loss that has happened, whether that be lighting a candle, whether that be an empty seat at the table for your gatherings this year, whether it be just time given to reminisce, to speak the name of your loved one, I think is a very key thing to do, to acknowledge the reality of what's happened.
So how can support groups be helpful to those people who are grieving?
Support groups, in my experience, can be so very meaningful and helpful to many who are grieving. There is something special, I think, about being in a setting with other grievers. Many people who are grieving the loss of a loved one wonder whether they verbalize it or not. Is what I'm feeling normal? Are there others who feel the way I do? And in a community of grievers, in a grief support setting, one can listen to others who are at different points along the journey of grief and benefit from knowing they're not alone, benefit from knowing that others have felt similarly to them at given times and places, and just to have a community of support with people that do care, do understand, and are willing to give space, as I've talked about already, to acknowledging grief.
St. Luke's Hospice House offers support groups to those who are grieving. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
We have two groups. We have a weekly grief support group that we call Cafe Hope, and it is an ongoing grief support group that is available to anyone, not just those who are St. Luke's patients or family members of St. Luke's patients, but anyone in the community can attend. It meets telephonically at present and has for many months because of the pandemic. And then we also have a Halo grief support group that is smaller and more specialized for those who are grieving losses that in one way or another have had to do with substance use disorder. And that group meets twice a month on Wednesday evenings. Certainly if people want more information, our grief support office phone number is 816-502-8917. And certainly I can provide more information for them if they want it or need it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
To learn more about understanding the grief journey, visit stlukeskc.org/grief journey. You can also stay up to date with all the latest developments on the COVID pandemic and other health news from St. Luke's at stlukeskc.org/news. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time on Health News You Can Use.